All right, we are back here talking March Madness. The Final Four is now set. Joining me today to break down the Blue Blood affair, the host of Seeing Red podcast, our co-host of the month of March on the podcast, Troy Mauriello is here. Troy, how are you?
Mike, I'm doing well. Just finished a great weekend of games, of course, and we're looking forward to a really exciting Final Four with two really cool matchups. So, of course, I'm doing well.
Yeah, I have to say, I wanted to start off. I mean, generally the games were a lot of fun. Sunday was probably a letdown compared to the other 3 days, but the basketball is a pretty top notch when the referee's not getting in the way.
Yeah. I think that, this was a really good tournament. I think I would say, a lot of upsets early. You had kind of the one Cinderella team in St. Peter's. But when you look at the end of the day, it's four blue bloods in the final four, makes for some really exciting matchups. And like you mentioned, some really exciting play over the weekend. Sunday wasn't the best. The Elite Eight as a whole probably wasn't the most entertaining games, but I think that you are left with four of the best teams in the country right now. Playing for the Final Four. Of course, Arizona, Gonzaga, they get knocked out early, which I'm sure we'll get to in a second. But as a whole, I think that this tournament kind of played out how you want a tournament to play out. You had a lot of upsets early. You had the one Cinderella, and then you kind of had relative chalk, outside of North Carolina, but some, blue blood teams playing in the Final Four.
Yeah, I'm also gonna throw out there for the people on Twitter going, "Oh, Villanova's not a blue blood." I'm like, we're still in UCLA blue blood stats and then won one title since 1975. We can give Villanova blue blood stats winning three national titles since 1985.
Yeah. I think they would qualify at this point. What's that? Three Final Fours in the last 7 years, I
Yeah,
think. That's blue blood status at this point. I mean, I don't know. They don't have maybe the long history of some of those other schools, but at this point now, they're a premier program in college basketball. And they've been that since 2013, 2014. They've been consistently a top five program in the country. So yeah, I think that they are certainly, if they're not a blue blood, they're certainly approaching that status for sure.
yeah. Let's talk about real quick. Let's put the bow on the Cinderella story of St. Peter's. They give one more March miracle where they upset Purdue. They get to the Elite Eight, first 15 seed ever do that. Then they run to the buzzsaw in North Carolina. So the whistle's not going their way early. North Carolina just finally figured out how to attack them, managed to take advantage of the lack of size the Peacocks have. But all in all, this is still going to be what I think, in my opinion, the greatest Cinderella run the tournament's ever seen.
Oh yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. The resolve that they showed, taking down, three teams on their way to the Elite Eight. We've never seen anything like it before. You kind of had a feeling that when it did end, it was going to kind of go up in flames in a blowout, like we saw on Sunday against North Carolina. I don't think anyone saw them losing like a 5 point game or something like that. I think, in my opinion, when they did lose, it was going to be something like that, where a team just overpowered them. But yeah, it doesn't take away the incredible run that they had. What a job that Shaheen Holloway did at St. Peter's, getting them all the way to the Elite Eight. Like I said, we've never seen this before. That's what March Madness is just all about. If you would have gone back 2 weeks ago and told anyone St. Peter's is going to be playing in the Elite Eight against North Carolina, you could probably count on one hand or two hands how many people in the world had that on their bracket going into or right after Selection Sunday. So it just speaks to this tournament and what's great about this tournament. And, it's the unpredictability of, who knows what's going to happen. This is a prime example of that. A 15 seed from right around here in Jersey City, making it all the way to the Elite Eight. Very, very cool story, getting them on the national stage. So although it ended kind of poorly for them, doesn't take away that's just a crazy run that they had.
Yeah, I remember when we did the selection show spot. Like, oh, good for St. Peter's. They got on national TV in the first like Friday night against Fox against Kentucky. So CBS they'll get their national exposure, and they stay around for 2 whole weeks. And you got to give the program credit here. I mean, like I know Shaheen Holloway's off to UConn, off to Seton Hall. We'll get that out in a second, but I mean,
Mhm.
with all the attention this program has, like nobody's gonna forget where St. Peter's is anymore. They're gonna know where they are. The enrollment at schools going to go up. The MAC's going to benefit as a whole because they get the extra
Yeah.
tournament units. They're good. It's a big win for everybody involved here.
Yeah, and it's like we talked about. St. Peter's, they'll probably never reach this level again as a school, or at least not anytime in the near future. But they will always have this. They will always have that 2022 tournament, everyone, whenever you bring up St. Peter's now, it's going to be, hey, remember when they made that run? It's like George Mason, or if you want to go into football, Appalachian State, or even like Boise State when they beat Oklahoma. Like they're always going to have that moment that everyone's going to remember. Hey, remember when St. Peter's made that run? It's just something that's going to go with them. And like you mentioned, it's going to benefit their program. It's going to benefit their school with all the new enrollees that I'm sure they're going to have, and it's going to benefit the MAC as well. So, yeah, although it ended, not great for them, it's just gonna. I would assume it's going to pay dividends for them and the conference in the future.
Yeah, and you as a Big East guy can't be too happy now you have Shaheen Holloway coaching your conference regularly.
Yeah, yeah. Just kind of works out that way, of course, for Seton Hall. They have Kevin Willard who completely resurrects their program, right? They were really an afterthought about, 5, 10 years ago, about 10 years ago. They give Willard some time and he turns them into a consistent tournament team, consistent top half of the Big East team. He kind of runs his course there, moves on to Maryland, and then who do they have in waiting but Shaheen Holloway, who is probably the hottest coach still on the market right now. Just happened to go to Seton Hall, and it was basically a done deal before the tournament even started that he was going to be going there. Yeah, it just works out for them, and definitely not looking forward to dealing with him in the Big East for the foreseeable future. But for Seton Hall, it's a great get for them, and their program should continue to be a top half of the Big East school.
Yeah, one other thing I want to touch on here before we dive into more specifics here is obviously the ACC continue their success here. I mean, they got two programs in the Final Four. Miami makes the Elite Eight, and now we have all the revisionist history going. Oh, the ACC wasn't overrated. They had a good year. She got more teams in. Wake Forest got snubbed, and I give the teams that made it credit. Like they played well in the tournament. I mean, AC a Big Ten would have killed to have the AC year. We had two teams in the Final Four and
Yeah.
one team in the Elite Eight. They got none of them that far. But to me, you can't completely ignore what happened in November and December and January and February. Like
Hmm.
the tournament, yes, I mean by nature the casuals like, oh, we pay attention now. They're winning now. The Big Ten's not. The SEC isn't. But
Hmm.
you can't forget they were not good in non-conference play. A lot of teams got punked in big games.
Hmm.
Right to the ones that are still there, but the league as a whole was bad.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we all kind of talked about Duke being a Final Four contender. I don't think that really surprised anyone. North Carolina, you and I had ripped on them a bunch this season, but we kind of could have seen a run like this coming. I guess it's not the most shocking thing in the world. And they take down Baylor, of course, but yeah, we don't want to let those results kind of skew how this conference looked all season long. Like you mentioned, the Big Ten, the SEC, those were better conferences than the ACC from November to early March, like you mentioned. We don't want to let what happens in 2 weeks in March, and North Carolina going on this really hot run for 2 weeks in March, and even Miami going on a run for a couple weeks in March skew, yeah, what happened really for the previous 4 months. The ACC had a really good team in Duke and had two teams that got hot at the right time, I would say. But yeah, that's not indicative of their conference being underrated all season long. I wouldn't say. I wouldn't go that far. I still think they were one of the lower Power Five conferences this season. So I don't think that they were underrated by any stretch of the imagination. They were just, they had one really good team and then two teams get hot, which makes them look a lot better at this time of year.
Yeah, I mean, this is basically the equivalent of what the Pac-12 did last year when they got
Yes.
four teams
Mhm.
into the Elite Eight. They had UCLA against the Final Four, coming with them a buzz of Jalen Suggs buzzer beater knocking off an undefeated Gonzaga. I think that's the kind of thing we're dealing with here.
Exactly, yeah, and even then they had what UCLA and Oregon State were two lower seeds making those runs to the Elite Eight. Yeah, very similar to that. No one went back at that point and said, "Hey, maybe the Pac-12 was better than we thought." We shouldn't do that with the ACC as well. They had one really good team and a couple teams get hot, but we don't want to let that skew the perception of them all season long.
Absolutely. And I think obviously we know who made the Final Four, but there were obviously a lot of lost opportunities here, especially
Mhm.
with some one seeds and the Big Ten as a whole. Like, who do you think blew their shot the most? Who had the biggest wasted opportunity here?
There's a lot of candidates for this, to be honest with you. I would go with the two out west one seeds, Arizona and Gonzaga. I would say both of them. Those are two teams that I thought Arizona was the best team in the country. I thought Gonzaga was 1A. I thought that those two teams are 1 and 1A, and I obviously wasn't alone with that. If you looked at everyone's bracket, almost everyone had one, if not both of them in the Final Four, and both of them can't even make an Elite Eight. They both get picked off early in the Sweet 16. Both in kind of similar type games. Arizona was a little bit further behind in theirs, but both of them just never really felt like they were going to win their games in their Sweet 16 either. Just a disappointing ending to 2 seasons when, you kind of thought that those teams were, there were obviously question marks. Gonzaga, the WCC was a good conference this season, but there's always question marks about Gonzaga, and even Arizona playing in the Pac-12, which looked a little bit limited, maybe very top heavy with them, UCLA. And USC, there were questions about both of them, and it turned out that those questions turned out to kind of be correct, or we turned out to be right to question some of them. Yeah, it's just a disappointing ending to 2 seasons for them. And again, Gonzaga, it's another failure for them in March Madness. It's another failure for them in a year when they were picked by a lot of people to win it all. You go back to November, they were the clear favorite. You even went into March, and they still went in as one of the favorites. You just gotta wonder if it's ever gonna happen for them. They've been on the top now for what, 10, 15 years, it feels like, where they've been a 1 seed, they've been around the top five. This year, I felt like it was their year. I felt like they were one of the best teams, like I mentioned, along with Arizona. And the fact that they, let alone they can't get to the Final Four, they can't even get to the Elite Eight. Very, very disappointing for them. So if I had to pick one, I would probably say Gonzaga, but both of the West Coast 1 seeds really let me down.
Yeah, the guard play was a big letdown for Gonzaga. I couldn't make outside shots. The other one I'll go with here is Purdue, because to me, like we talked last week, we said they have the recipe to beat St. Peter's. They have all the sides. They have Trevion Williams. They have Zach Edey. Matt Painter. I mean, also credits to Shaheen Holloway for having the brilliant game plan to throw Jaden Ivey off his game early by sending 2 guys with him the entire time, took him mentally out of it.
Yeah.
How Matt Painter does not change up what he's done all year and just put Edey and Trevion Williams on the floor together and dump into the post every single play. Like we saw in the second half when Trevion Williams got fed the ball like 6 possessions in a row, they scored about 12, 13 points. They went away from it again. So horrendous coaching job by Matt Painter.
Yeah, exactly. And with Purdue, you had what, 3-4 days to plan for this game.
Yeah.
It's not, I mean, Kentucky had a couple days too, but you almost want to like give them a pass in a way, because you say, who would have been able to take St. Peter's seriously? I mean, it is the NCAA tournament, sure, but you're Kentucky, you're St. Peter's. Like, you almost give them a pass for maybe coming out a little bit slow and being a little bit shell shocked in that game. Purdue, you just saw them beat 2 teams. You just saw them beat a Kentucky team that was a higher seed than you. To have 3-4 days to plan for that, and to not be able to, like you said, use your size to your advantage, and to not have a game plan that was going to, win the game for you. Yeah, that's just such a letdown for them. So I would agree with that as well. What a letdown for Purdue, a team that I was high on all season long, that I thought could be a Final Four contender. And they lose to St. Peter's in the Sweet 16. Just a really rough ending for a team that was looking like they could make their first Final Four in a while.
Yeah, I mean, they had the golden ticket. They had the number 1 in their region was bounced. Number 2 in the region was bounced. They found the number 4 in the region got bounced. They wouldn't even made it to the Elite Eight. It was all right in front of them. They could not beat the 15 seed because they don't not want to change how they play the entire season. And this is something where the best coaches are willing to adapt. We saw Mike Krzyzewski go to zone against Texas Tech and end up winning the game. Like that's something that Matt Painter just did not want to do.
Yeah, and in March, you see really the difference in good coaching versus average or mediocre or bad coaching. Even like you mentioned, there's a reason why we see Duke and we see North Carolina and we see Villanova and Kansas around at the end of the season. Maybe not Kansas, but the other three around at the end of the season. It's because they have these great coaches. And a coach like Matt Painter, sure, he's a very, very good coach. He's a very good regular season coach for sure. But in March, do you really trust him to get the job done? So far, no. And that's a prime example of it. Stray away from what you've been doing all season long. Make an adjustment to beat this 15 seed, and you're in the Elite Eight with a chance to go to the Final Four for the first time in forever. He couldn't do it. We're seeing just how important coaching becomes in these 2 weeks in March. It's important all season long for sure, but you can get by, I would say, in the regular season with average to mediocre coaching if you have the talent. In March, even if you have the talent, if you don't have the coaching, you're going to really struggle, and you're going to get bit at some point.
All right, let's take the Final Four teams off the table here. Who was the biggest winner of this round of the tournament?
I guess I would say Miami. If we're not saying Final Four teams, I would say Miami. A good run for them for sure. First Elite Eight, I think, in program history, they said. Obviously the obvious one is St. Peter's, but I'll go with Miami, making a run. It was a very like quiet Cinderella run for them. No one really mentioned that they were a 10 seed in the Elite Eight. They take down Auburn. And then they get a nice win over Iowa State. So yeah, I would say Miami making their first Elite Eight. They were in that game for a while until Kansas just ran through them in the second half. So a very, very good season for them. A season that, if you would have went back in November or even, into February, I would say no one would have been said that Miami is an Elite Eight team. So, a good run for them, again, under the radar, and maybe something to build on for that program going forward. So I would say Miami.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Arkansas as my winner here because not only do they frustrate Gonzaga in no way, and they knock off the Bulldogs, they give Duke a very hard time most of that game. Duke pulled away weight because of the talent edge they had there, but
Mhm.
great job by Muscle and getting a team ready for those two games.
Absolutely. And I also want to shout out Houston as well. A team that was right on the doorstep of back-to-back Final Fours. Man, if they could have hit a couple 3-pointers in that game against Villanova, it's a completely different game. Even down the stretch, when they go 1 for 20, if you go 4 for 20, that's just a totally different game from 3-point range. It's just a totally different game, and a letdown for them for sure in the Elite Eight. But that shouldn't take away the job that Kelvin Sampson did that season, losing, I think, their top 6 scorers from last season. I want to say 6 or 7 scorers from last season. They're still in the Elite Eight, and they were still on the doorstep of the Final Four. So credit to them. That's a program that has completely changed its perception in the last 3-4 years from what they were prior to when he was there. And that's a program that should, roll through that conference for years to come. Now they've really built something there, and I'm excited to see where they go in the future.
Yeah, and you also wonder with them if they have a healthy Tremont Mark and Marcus Sasser, they have a good job to win this whole tournament.
Yeah, I think it would have been a real different story if they had those two guys and didn't lose them to the injuries. Yeah, I think they could have been a team that would have been a 1 seed or near a 1 seed and potentially, still playing right now.
All right, let's go the other way. Who is the big loser of this of this set of games here? I mean, I'd say Purdue is obviously high on the board here. I want to say the Big Ten as a whole because again, like how with 9 teams in here do you not have a team in the Elite Eight? That's really bad.
Yeah, and especially after last season too, the letdown in the tournament for the Big Ten last season as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a real letdown for them 2 years in a row now. And now you're gonna have that narrative, right? Like when this happens for a couple of years in a row, you're gonna have that narrative of people saying, that your conference is really strong in January and February. Then when it comes time in the NCAA tournament, you don't stand up. That's the perception that's around the Big Ten now, and it's kind of been earned the last 2 tournaments. To not get a Final Four team and to not get an Elite Eight team, it's a shame for them.
Yeah, I mean they had Michigan got these Elite Eight last year before they were upset by
Yep.
Houston. But I will say also in terms of what's going on there, I mean, this is a year where you had your best team playing a 15 seed in the Sweet 16. Like how you don't get the job done is not great. Is not good.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and you obviously would have had a shot against an 8 seed in the Elite Eight to go to the Final Four. Yeah, the letdown. I mean, if I was picking one, I would have said Purdue as well for the biggest disappointment. I won't double down on that, even though it is the answer. But staying in that region, I think UCLA's got to be disappointed as well. They obviously lose a tough game against UNC, but throughout the course of the season, I think UCLA has to feel like they were the better team or a better team than UNC for sure. They have a shot at a second straight Final Four. Because they would have been playing a 15 seed in the Elite Eight, and they can't get it done. And for a team that came into this season with, I would say, legitimate national title expectations, to lose to an 8 seed, I know it's UNC, but to lose to an 8 seed in the Sweet 16, that's a big letdown. Maybe not, in the micro of the tournament, but in the macro of this season, when you zoom out and you look at what the expectations were after last season, losing on a buzzer beater in the Final Four to Gonzaga, the expectation, I would say, would have been to at least get back to a Final Four going into the year. And they just it just never felt like they fully clicked, even in the tournament in their wins. Just never felt like they were like fully in sync with the team that we all thought that they could be. They showed flashes of it for sure, but it just was not consistent with them all season long. And yeah, a letdown for them because I think they would probably be playing in the Final Four right now if they were able to take care of North Carolina on Friday night.
Yeah, let's talk about the Final Four teams left. We'll start with Villanova here. And the big news from them coming out here is unfortunate injury news because Justin Moore blows out his Achilles tendon in the win over Houston. Now he's out for the rest of the tournament, probably into next year as well. So, like, obviously, their second leading scorer is a big deal here. So, like, how much does this hurt Villanova's like title winning upside to lose him right now?
Yeah, it's a shame for them, right? Because last year Colin Gillespie has the season-ending injury at the end of really in the beginning of March, the last regular season game for them. He's out for the tournament, and now they lose Justin Moore on the doorstep of the Final Four. Really a shame, 2 straight years now for them that they lose such a key player to their team. The thing to remember with Villanova is they do not play a lot of guys. They play 6 or 7 guys a night. So losing anyone really would be for the remainder of the season would be a big blow to them. But losing a guy like Justin Moore, who's I just think he's so talented and he's able to score for himself so easily for them. He hits big shots. I mean, everyone on that team hits big shots, but it feels like anytime they need a basket, they're going to him or they're going to Gillespie. Losing him is just is going to be really, really tough for a team that just doesn't, by choice, really doesn't really go very deep into their starting lineup or past their starting lineup. You look at Villanova, they, like I said, they play a 6-7 man rotation. So losing any of those guys would have been a big blow. But outside of Gillespie, Justin Moore, I would say is really their most important player. So it's a big, big blow for them. It couldn't have come at a worse time. Obviously, you feel for the kid who was having a great, great season. It comes at the end of the game too, when the game was kind of already decided as well. He had to still be in the game at that point. They had to close it out, but just horrible timing. 2 years in a row now for Villanova teams. Last year's team probably didn't have those national title expectations, but this year's team certainly did go into the Final Four, and that's a big, big blow for them. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to recover.
Absolutely. And I think the next time I talk about is obviously Duke, which goes to the Final Four out of the West region. Mike Krzyzewski's now setting records where he's won 100 tournament games, been to 13
Mhm.
Final Fours, both tops all time. Now you're sitting here, though, if you're Duke, you're getting the kind of historical pressure you had when you lost Coach K's last home game. You lost Coach K's last AC tournament final against Virginia Tech. So now here comes North Carolina with the first ever Final Four meeting between these two programs. Like the kind of pressure they're going to be under. I think if they get out of this game, they can win. They win the tournament. But the pressure they're going to
Mhm.
be under here is enormous, and
Mhm.
that's what I'm going to be worried about.
Yeah, and there's reason to worry, of course. Like you mentioned, the final game at Cameron Indoor, they kind of lay an egg there. Final ACC tournament game, they lay an egg there. It's been 2 times in the last month now that we've seen them come up short in these big moments for Coach K. I think that was honestly maybe a good thing for them. They might look back and say that, especially that North Carolina game, Coach K's final game at home. That they might look back and say that was a good thing that they needed to kind of, maybe get it out of their system. I think we talked about on this show, how that game, there was just so much surrounding it. Think of all the alumni, the former players that were there, the celebrities that were there for that game. That's a lot, so they now have experience kind of playing in a setting like that already, and then of course the ACC tournament as well. They kind of know, maybe they know what to expect a little more than they did going into that final regular season game against North Carolina. So maybe it may turn out to be a good thing. Maybe it gives them that experience that they didn't have, leading into that final game at Cameron Indoor. I'm not sure. Who knows? They're college kids, how they're going to come out and react. But to me, I think that final game maybe was a good thing. And they've now played 4 straight games in a row where their backs are against the wall, where it could be their legendary coach's final game. So they've got experience playing with that in the back of their heads as well. So I'm actually pretty confident that Duke's going to come out. I'm starting to think that it's going to be a storybook ending for Coach K, unfortunately for a majority of the country.
Yeah, I think the team I'm watching here, obviously, I think it's Kansas, because Kansas on Sunday comes out of the first half, can't hit a shot, can't hit a free throw. They're down 35-29 at the half to Miami. And you're saying, oh no, it's another Bill Self choke job
Yep.
in Elite Eight. And then they come out here, they play one of the most dominant halves of basketball ever seen. They outscore the Hurricanes 47-15 after the break, which is almost unheard of. They're dominating from start to finish, and after the halftime break. You see something like that. I've not seen a team do that this year in the tournament. Like, to me, I know this is a little controversial considering the talent Duke has. I put Kansas the favorite heading into the Final Four.
Yeah, and I would have a tough time disagreeing with that, to be honest with you. They get a hobbled Villanova team missing its second or even one of its best players in the Final Four, and then they're going to get a Duke North Carolina team that 48 hours before that is going to be playing the most emotional game of these guys' lives against their biggest rival. I mean, obviously it's hard to have a letdown in the national title game, but I could certainly see that happening. Maybe a little bit of a hangover from that game. Yeah, I would put Kansas as the favorite right now for sure, over Duke, because I think that they have an easier matchup in the Final Four versus Villanova team, like we said, that's going in pretty hobbled. And then they might have a Duke and North Carolina team that's a little bit fatigued or hungover from its previous game. So, but yeah, what a performance in the second half from them. I remember at halftime going to my dad who I was watching the game with and saying, this would just be so Kansas to lose this game, so Bill Self, with a trip to the Final Four on the line, and you lose to a 10 seed Miami. But they just completely hit a different gear in the second half. And they've gone through some adversity in this tournament now. They had that big lead against Providence. Providence clawed the way back, and they were able to close them out. They played a tough game against Creighton, and they were able to close them out. And then they were obviously trailing at the half against Miami. So, credit to Kansas. They've shown a lot in this tournament so far. And yeah, it would be. I would agree with you that I think that they're the favorite right now.
Yeah, I think they are the favorite here. And North Carolina gets here playing with house money, obviously, based on their seed and where they were. I mean, back on February 16th, they lost at home to Pittsburgh. And we're sitting here going, oh boy, they may not make the tournament. And then they have the big turnaround. They have to gut out a win over Syracuse on the Monday before the Duke game.
Yeah.
They get in, they're red hot. They nearly collapsed against Baylor. Like, it feels like there's so many different ways this season should have gone wrong for them. But the fact they're here, they deserve a ton of credit.
You're right. There's so many different spots where you could have had, where they either would have not even made the tournament or been knocked out at a certain point in the tournament. The Baylor one is a good example of that. But yeah, they're playing great basketball right now. And, it goes back to what we said earlier, if you can get into the tournament, doesn't really matter what happened in November, December, January, February. If you can just get in and play your best basketball for a 4 or 5 game stretch, you're going to be playing into the Elite Eight and into the Final Four. Of course, they get a little bit of a gift playing St. Peter's in the Elite Eight, and they're able to take advantage of that. But that was, an impressive win over UCLA, and as we talked about, an even more impressive win over Baylor previous, losing that big lead and still being able to win it in overtime. So yeah, it's like you said, there's just so many different spots where their season could have taken a turn for the worse and really, taken a turn for being finished. And yet here they are. Speaks to the resiliency of them with, a first-year head coach. Just a great job by them. And it's the beauty of March Madness, right? A team that we never saw coming playing in the Final Four.
Absolutely. Now let's look at these Final Four matchups here. Kansas and Villanova here. I do think this game is going to be closer than people anticipate because Villanova, even though they lost Justin Moore, the way they play, they are very efficient execution on offense. They're the best free throw shooting team I've seen in a long time where they get to the stripe, they're hitting those shots. They'll keep them in the game. And Kansas, they are a great team. Ray Martha makes a big difference, but they do only play about 6-7 guys. It's not like they're going to overwhelm Villanova with depth here. So I think this game will be close. I think Kansas will pull it out based on the difference of Justin Moore being out, but I do think it's going to be a very tight game.
Yeah. And, look back to the Elite Eight game for Villanova. They didn't play well in that game at all. I believe Houston had like more field goals made, the Houston outplayed them essentially, but just Villanova is just so efficient. They know, if there's 5 minutes left in the game and Villanova's in a close game, you feel very, very confident that they're going to close that game out and win that game. They just, like you said, they hit free throws at a record clip, NCAA record clip. They're just so smart. They're a veteran team, even though they don't have that depth, and they have even less depth now without Justin Moore. Yeah, they play so smart. Jay Wright has 5-6 days to get ready for this game. You never want to count him out. So I could see this being a game, but like you mentioned, I think Villanova lacking that, real second, strong option aside Colin Gillespie. I think Kansas in the end is gonna will its way to victory. But I think this will be a good game, like you said. I think I could see Kansas winning by 5 or 6 points. It being a close game throughout, just because the pace that Villanova plays too. They're taking 20 plus seconds every single time that they have the ball. They're going to, run the shot clock, get in, pass up, a good shot to try to get a great shot. Losing one guy doesn't change all of that. So they will hang around, I think, but I still do think Kansas will even though they don't have the depth, they have a couple more closers, I would say. And I think that they'll outlast them in the end.
Yeah, the other game, obviously, it might be the most viewers TBS ever gets on night, is the first ever Duke North Carolina NCAA tournament game. The theater of it being potentially the chance that Carolina already ruined Mike Krzyzewski's last game at Cameron Indoor Stadium. They could end his career here, sending him home in the Final Four. Like, there is no pressure on North Carolina, in my opinion, in this game whatsoever. It's all on Duke. And That's gonna be such incredible theater to watch that game.
It's going to be phenomenal. I mean, you talk about, it's just so fitting, right? These two teams, they never play in the tournament in their long story history of their rivalry. And now the last game for the most iconic coach that this sport has ever, or that this collegiate sports has ever seen, in Mike Krzyzewski, one of his final games. They finally meet up in the Final Four. It's a storybook ending. And like you said, I think North Carolina, they are playing with house money. They're really, the pressure is all on Duke for sure. But I kind of hinted at this before. I think that they got it out of their system. In the final regular season game, I think they got those kind of nerves out of their system now. Maybe they'll play a little bit more looser than they were in that game. And they have that in the back of their mind. I think it's now a storybook ending for Coach K. Unfortunately, we're going to see him get that revenge on North Carolina, get that one final win over North Carolina, and then go to the title game. And then we see what happens in the title game. But I see Coach K and Duke getting by UNC here. So I'm going to go with kind of relative chalk and say Kansas and Duke in the Final Four.
Who would you have winning that game right now?
It's such a tough game to pick. Like I said, though, I would still say Kansas, I think, because I think that they're going to have a slightly easier time with Villanova than Duke will with North Carolina. I see that Duke UNC game coming down to the final minute, but Duke getting it done. And, I just think that the emotions of either team that wins that game, I still think is just going to have a little bit of a hangover there from all the theater that's going to be in that game. Whereas Kansas is going to be kind of the appetizer of the evening. So I still think Kansas, but that's going to be another great game. I could see that going either way.
Yeah, I'm with you right there. They're going to pick Kansas over Duke as my final pick here. I think that's what's going to happen here. But Troy, thanks all the time. Really appreciate it. Before I let you, I can be following social media. Keep up some of the stuff you're up to in the Seeing Red podcast.
Definitely. Yeah. You can check me out, Seeing Red podcast. If you're a St. John's fan, we just did a season recap last week. So definitely check that out. We'll be talking with Zach Braziller of the New York Post soon in the next couple of days as well. So yeah, if you're a St. John's fan, definitely check out the Seeing Red podcast.